how he got started.
Yeah. Yes. And why Arbinger? Why that name? What is the significance? How does it connect with this moment? Arbinger, the name.
Oh, the name Arbinger? Well, I received my PhD from Yale University in 1967. I went to Yale in '63. We went together, and by the time we left, we had 3 children. It was a very busy time for us. I wrote my dissertation on in an area that might be called, well, it is called the philosophy of mind, but even perhaps more precisely has to do with the theoretical foundations of psychology. And I knew at the time that there was something about psychology that I was uncomfortable with, that wasn't sufficiently expansive or sufficiently sensitive to ordinary human experience. And so excuse me just a moment, it may turn out that there's some things that I would like to have transcribed for you or something like that, so I'm just going to do this. And but I did that dissertation. We chose among several universities. We chose to go back to my alma mater, which was Brigham Young University in Utah. I had a lot of affection for that school, and so we settled in. Fairly quickly, I was made an administrator. So after I'd been there about 5 years, I was the dean of a college at the university, and a man was hired. I talked to Nagendra about him today, who had been a very important scholar, an Englishman named Arthur Henry King. I was very impressed with him, but I didn't know that much about him, except that he was one of the world's great experts on Renaissance literature, particularly Shakespeare. And he was the Assistant Director General of the British Council up to not long before that time, which meant he was in charge of all education in the Commonwealth. He also was a very important scholar, and you would have thought he would have gone to the English department. But the English department was very rigid. They said, when we teach Shakespeare, we teach 8 plays in a semester in our Shakespeare class. He said, you can't even teach 1 play in a semester. And so they were uncomfortable, he was uncomfortable, and I snatched him into our college.
Hey, Terry. Hello.
Nice to meet you. My wife, Susan.
Hello.
And my son, Daniel.
Nice to meet you. My honor.
And we just became very good colleagues and friends and began working together. And one day, we were working on a basic and important text in linguistics called by a man named John Lyons. And the question came up in our discussion. Now think about this. Does the speaker of a sentence have any claim to understand what he is saying better than other people, better than the hearers? And I knew two things. Number one, I knew that people in my field, philosophy, would say, oh yes, he does. Because people, and it's widely assumed in philosophy, because people have an immediate, correct awareness of their own intentions, their own meaning, what's going on inside their heads. And I had good reason to know that that was true. Good reason to know that most philosophers would say, almost all would say, yes, the speaker can claim to have, has a better claim to understand what he's saying than anybody else. But I also knew I didn't have any reasons for believing this. I just knew it was so. I also knew that it was false. That, in fact, the speaker does not necessarily know what he himself is saying better than other people, and maybe far worse. Okay? And I recall that night after we put the children to bed, I lay on the floor in our living room on Maple Lane with our new carpet, which was all we could afford. Remember? And I wrote 25 pages by hand. And I didn't understand a word of it, but I knew that if I could only understand that, I would have something. Come in, come in. Hello, I'm Terry.
Lakshmi.
Yes, this is my wife, Susan. And this is my son, Dan.
Hi there.
Lakshmi. Raphael.
Nice to meet you, Raphael, my wife, Susan.
Thank you, Raphael.
Good to meet you both, please. I get to be to sit next to you. To her, that's too. Right in between you. None of the rest of you enjoy.
It's hard for her to see which is
No, no.
sitting right next to you.
What else? So anyway, that's how I got started, and it became kind of an obsession. Because quickly it became apparent that in the world of philosophy, in the world of psychology, this problem could not be explained. It's an old problem. In various forms, it goes back to ancient times. But in our era, of course, Sigmund Freud, the Austrian psychoanalyst, was very famous for trying to deal with this problem, which is that people engage in behavior systematically and deliberately, obviously planning it and so on. Behavior that is destructive to themselves and that they cannot quite comprehend. They don't know why they do these self-destructive